Okay. Just to begin with, if everybody could join me, I'd like to do the pledge to the flag to start. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And I just have a couple things I'd like to go over before we actually get into the program. Again, general, if there's people new, the restrooms are right over here. In the back, there's like coffee and ice water and things. We're recording these and we'll put them up on our website so that people can look at this later. If you have friends or whatever and you enjoyed this, they can hop on there and check it out. That'll take at least a week or so anyway. Next month, we don't have anything definite yet, but it'll be like our Christmas party for the Cepta group, and maybe we'll be able to find somebody. I was just talking to Simmons today, and it's potential that he could come and just talk with us in general. But we'll send emails and things out in the back. When you sign up, if you give us your email, we'll send you updates on what's going on, programs like this. So if something builds up for next month, we'll put that on there, and if you go to our website, you can find that out also, or we'll send you a direct email. So if you haven't signed up and you want to, that's what we'll do. We'll keep that on record and send out the latest info about what's going on. Two things as far as the area, East Penn School District area, that's basically what we cover. The school still is going on with the what would be the unlawful burying of the trash and hazardous waste. They still don't want to really pursue anything like that, and that's costing the taxpayer many tens of thousands of dollars just to handle that really shouldn't have been done. Decisions were made by the administration to bury stuff instead of getting it cleaned up right away. And if people could come to the meeting and express their dissatisfaction with the way they handled that, that would be great. And then the other thing that we just found out, we attend the Lehigh County Commissioners meeting, and this just happened. My wife was at that meeting. And it turns out that there's the LCA, Lehigh County Authority, which does the sewage and water for outlying areas. And they just bought Allentown, if people remember that, to help offset the pensions for the Allentown employees. They are trying to possibly connect to the Emmaus water system through development that's going to go out in the back by Indian Creek, by Cedar Crest, and like Weiss Market on the other side in the back there. The concern with that, as far as I can see, we fought long and hard a couple of years ago to keep the Emmaus water system by the control of Emmaus. If LCA can tie into Emmaus water system, they have bottlers out in their area, a couple of them. And amazingly, people don't realize this, but that's an international control law. So the United States can't stop those bottlers from pumping water. And if you remember years ago, when there was a drought, sure enough, Lower Macungie residents were put on restrictions. The bottling companies could pump to their heart's desire.
While we were drowning in rain.
Well, whatever, yep. But if they put a pipe connection to Emmaus, I fear that they're going to say, well, we don't have to drill another well, we're just going to suck it out this way. And those bottling companies have action to it. And the other thing to consider is Allentown fluoridates its water. I don't think LCA does. But since there's a pipe connected to there, if water's going back that way, guess who's getting fluoridated water? And they might not even know it. And then guess who might get it if it comes through our back door? So we'll keep an eye on that, and that's a serious concern that I have for that. That's enough of that. Now we have two gentlemen that are here today to give us the main presentation, which is a different aspect of what's going on with the pension crisis. And their thought is that the investments that were made by the funds that were collected for the pensions were invested in somewhat risky ventures, and it cost us a lot of money and fees to even do that. And now I'd like to hand it over, if I could, to Rich Schucker, and then we have a PA State rep from Reading area. They're both from Reading area. Caltadrone will also speak, but they worked it out that he will go after Rich does, if that works out for you, gentlemen.
got it on? Okay. When were we told, or well, let me ask the question this way. When did the pension crisis actually start? Based on the information we have. When did it start? Anybody want to guess?
2001?
2001?
1930.
Well, how about, you're close. It actually started before that. Okay? It was actually that bad that in September 26, 2006, Auditor Jack Wagner wrote this report on it. Now all the blue tags here is everything that was wrong with the system that they still have not fixed. He's stated that this report includes projections that reveal the potential for a financial crisis at PSERS in 2012-2013. And this is what needed to be done to fix so we wouldn't have the crash. Of course, as we all know, it wasn't followed. Okay? I'm going to let Tom talk about how this came together and all of that. I want to go over the numbers, then Tom's going to come up, talk to you about the state side, and then we'll answer any questions. Okay? First slide. The PSCRS, or the SERS, is one of the most risky pension funds in the country. They have the most high-risk investments. I know some of you people are retired. Would you put 46% of your investments in high risk if you're retired? That would be a foolish thing to do, wouldn't it? But that's what they're doing. Pennsylvania leads the nation in a total proportion of alternative private equity, hedge funds, real estate, and other illiquid investment managed by high fee managers. You have a pension fund. You're retired. Do you have one advisor? Or do you have 30? It would make no sense to hire 30, would it? The SCRS is second only to Washington State in risk. Hedge fund. Does any of you know what a hedge fund is? Is it high risk? It most certainly is. A hedge fund is an investment vehicle that pulls capital from a number of investors and invests in securities and other instruments like limited partnership, limited liability. Most people don't know that hedge funds are not regulated by the SEC and FINRA. Why would they not be regulated? Because they're too risky. But that's what we have in here. I'll give you an example of a hedge fund. Quite a few years ago, the federal government decided Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac should start giving subprime loans, high-risk loans. Remember that? Did it cause a problem in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and cause a market crash? Answer is yes. Before we had the high-risk investments there, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac used to package the mortgages together and sell them to Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and all of that. They turned around and would sell them as government-backed securities that we could buy. That's the circle of how that money follows and stays in the system. Hedge funds they're not regulated. The high-risk investments could not be put in the package for government-secured mortgages. But now Freddie Mae and Freddie Mac, they need more money to process back through the system. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac can give more mortgages. So what they decided to do is start something new called hedge funds. Mortgage hedge funds. Now, you as individuals can't buy them, but they can be sold to the pension funds because there's no regulations there. And if they go bad, who's going to have to pay for that if it goes bad in the pensions? The taxpayers. Actually, I think hedge funds and pension funds should be totally eliminated. That's my personal opinion. Anthony Clark, SER's former chief investment officer, persuaded the system to pump $250 million into an investment called Tiger Management. It was one of their first planned hedge fund strategy. Do you think it worked? Actually, what happened was, in a little over 12 months, that $250 million that was invested there lost $17 million. So they questioned him about it. And they actually agreed that we're going to let this go, even though he lost $17 million. But in the process of that, they not only lost $17 million of our dollars, they paid him $11 million in fees. So he made out big time. 6 months later, Tiger Investments come back to the pension fund and said, well, I'm going to give you your money back. You gave me $250 million. I'm not giving the $11 million back, and I lost $17 million, so you're only going to get $238 million back. Now, what's interesting about Tiger Investments, if you do some track record on them, they were only in business for 10 years. Would you put that much money of your pension money in something that was that new? I wouldn't. So who made out? The taxpayers lost. They're coming after us for this. Venture capital. This is another high-risk investment. Venture capital is for new startup companies. Ones that are established. They're not on the stock exchange. Okay? Are they regulated? No. Because they're ultra high risk. Venture capital is similar to a private equity. Now, private equity, you're actually, what's happening is the investment banker is lending the money to somebody to get a business started. They're not really established. We're just going to get them started. Any of you heard of Solyndra?
Yes.
Was that a successful investment?
Until they got the government loan.
Yep. They knew the right people. And programs like that is in the pension funds. And this should be outlawed. The pension funds are supposed to protect the people who are giving them the money, and they're also supposed to be protecting us, the taxpayers. They're not supposed to be hurting both of us. Not supposed to be hurting either of us. This is part of the problem. Pennsylvania Pension tries real estate and hedge funds to fill a gap. Now, what I've heard from legislators is, oh, we just started doing this since 2008, since the market crashed. I've had a lot of them tell me that. Well, I'm going to prove to you from their information that that's a lie. Because they went into them prior to the crash, that's why they took the biggest hit, and they've not recouped yet. Actually, in 2007, the SERS and the PRS was solvent. They had enough money to pay all the benefits. They were not back a dime. There was no shortage at all. So from 2007 till today, now we're missing $50 billion. Does that make sense to you? It doesn't to me. Hedge funds. I'm in this business, and I talked to somebody earlier that his son was in the business. I guarantee you, that that gentleman's son and I would love to be paid 2% of all the assets that I hold with the client, and then also get paid 20% of all the profits that's made. Doesn't that sound a little bit extreme to you? I'm going to be honest with you. The investments that I get paid by the companies. I get 0.25% per year, not 2 plus 20. That's robbery. Well, there we go. Pennsylvania Inquirer has noted that it's hard to know how much money or how much Pennsylvania SERS paid in hedge fund fees because not all the fees are calculated on their books. The only thing that's on their books is the commissions that they pay out. But when they take the money out of the profits, they have no idea how much they're actually paying. Now, if they're paying $4, $5, $9 billion a year in commission, don't you think that's enough? Pennsylvania's two biggest pension funds has tens of billions of dollars short of being able to pay all the money that the other retirees. If the employees that work for the SERS and the teachers, if they put money in that account every single month, should they be held responsible to make this up? No. If this is poor investments, should we as taxpayers be forced to make it up? No. What we need to do is go after the problem, and that is the poor investing, which we're going to get into here. 26.3 billion Pennsylvania state employees retirement system had more than 46% of its assets in high risk. At one point, they had hired over 400 companies to administer that. So every company that was supposedly helping them was getting paid. That's money that we have to pay and the employees have to pay. That should have not went out. Now, if that money would have been invested from 2007 to today, how much more money do you think the fund would have?
Be fully funded.
It would be over fully funded. Over. Actually, my calculations come out that if this would have been handled properly, there would be enough money in both them funds that we as taxpayers would not have to put a penny in. The employees, instead of being at 7.5%, could be at 6%, and that's all the funding that would be needed. And it would be solvent. It would be more than enough money. The system paid about $1.35 billion in management fees in the last 5 years. That's a lot of money. The actual rate of return that they stated on here in the Philadelphia Inquiry was 3.6%. That's what they said the pensions made. Now, one of the things that I've done, all these brochures up here, they're not brochures, they're actually books. I analyzed them. And what I found is that the system since 2007, the PSERS and the SERS, has made less than 1% per year. They might as well put the money under the mattress. Instead of paying out all the fees, they should have kept the fees, didn't invest at all, and they'd have more money. This is that bad that our Auditor General, D. Pasquale, issued a statement on September 24, 2014. And he urged the leaders of the state's pensions to reconsider the $7.6 billion in hedge funds. Now, they didn't follow Jack Wagner in 2006, Do you think they followed them now? In fact, 5.7 billion in hedge funds in the SCRS, the PSCRS, and 1.9 in the SCRS. He said you're not supposed to do that. The reason he said he didn't want you to do that is because there's no oversight. None. They can do what they want. There's no guidelines for pensions. They liked his recommendation so much that on September 17th, 2014, the SCRS invested an additional $100 million of the pension funds in alternative high-risk investments. Now, to me, this is a crime. And I'm going to let Tom tell you what he plans to do about this. D. Pasquale and Jack Wagner wants the funds handled one way, and it's called the prudent man rule. It's how a prudent man would invest the money. The money is supposed to be safe, it's supposed to be secure, and it's supposed to be able to provide this future income. There's not supposed to be any high risk in here. Now was recommended by De Pasquale and Wagner. And basically, these pension funds, or the trustees, are telling these people they can go pound sand. They don't care what they recommend. And I believe it's due to follow the money. I'm going to let Tom explain part of that. Actually, the SCRS in 1980 had 3 investment consultants. And from 1980 to 1989, they went from 3 to 47. From 1990 through 1999, they went up to 116. Now, over that second 10-year period of time, guess what happened to the rate of return? Okay. Then they increased it to 2005 up to 167. Rate of return went down. Then they were up to 400. And they expect to make money? And what we're going to show next is, this is a list of the advisors that they have in the pension fund now. This is their latest report. Now think about this. Every one of these are getting paid every single month. Think this is robbery? And that's just one of the funds. That is the PSCRS, not the SCRS. That's just one of them. But the other one's just as bad. Now the fees, yep, the fees. Let's see, the SCRS, yep, the SCRS is the next one. Merrill Lynch last year got paid $816,844. This is a list of the ones that got over $20,000. They actually paid out $4.7 million in fees last year to have these pension funds, whatever they're doing there, stealing the people's money. Now, $4.7 million, 1 year. The PSCRS, they paid out $9.2 million. And Goldman Sachs got paid $1.2 million. I question sometimes why this is happening, and one of the things that I say a lot of times in a lot of meetings, you got to follow the money. right? Dominic Pileggi from the Finance, Insurance, and Real Estate in 2012 received $361,000 in campaign donations. Joe Scarnati, $311,000. Now, we all know, and we've always heard, that the Republicans are the ones receiving all the money from the finance industry. How many of you heard that? Right? Yeah, right. Rob McCord, $443,340. Now, guess who's on the board of the PSCRS and the SCRS? Rob McCord. Okay? Now, when I get into rate of returns, he's also on another board. And we'll cover that later. Jay Costa, $102,000. Mike Torzai, $329,000. Frank Damati, $62,000. It's both parties. It is both parties. Tom's going to explain how that ties together. This is the most recent 2012 statement from the PSCRS. Private equity, 16.4%. Private debt, 3.1%. Venture capital, 1.8%. Private markets, 21%. Real estate, 13%. Limited partnerships, 1.8%. And risk parley, this is the ultra high risk, 2.3%. How much money should be in a retirement fund out of them sectors? None. None. That money should actually be in income producing products. So the people are guaranteed an income. To me, this is probably the most important chart that I'm going to go over with you. This is right from the PSCRS's website. This is not something I made up. They provided this. If you go look at 1990, the red line, the real high one, fixed income. Is that safe for retirement? Yeah. The blue line is U.S. equities. That's a good mix for retirement. How much is in high risk? The little green area down here? Okay. How much is in non-U.S. equity? That little yellow? Now, by 1995, there was a lot more in the U.S. equity, which was good. The market was good in the 90s, wasn't it? Everybody made money. So that made sense. But what actually happened is you see the green line? Constantly goes up, doesn't it? So by the time 2008 happened, they have increased the risk by 600%. This all happened prior to the crash. I had one of your friendly local legislators tell me that. Well, they did this after 2008 so they could make it up. I said, did you ever read the PSCRS's web chart, their charts? Either you're not telling me the truth, or the PSCRS isn't telling me the truth, Ryan. I was in Ryan's office and approached him about this to point out that the information that he's getting, and I'm going to assume from leadership, is not correct. This is the history of the PSCRS. Recently, this was an article that was put out that they had stated that the earning assumptions are 7.5%, but what they made was a rate of return of 14.9% for the 2013-2014 fiscal year. Now, if you got $50 billion, and if you're making a round figure of 15%, how much should the fund grown? 7.5 billion. Right? When you look at the actual numbers of what they made 1 billion. And I'm going to show you that from their information. So if they made 7.5 billion, what happened to the 6.5? The numbers that they're giving us do not make sense at all. Okay, there you go. PSA invested $50 billion. We're $50 billion short. That's what that amounts to on that one. This is very interesting too. Basically what they're stating is that over the last 10 years, they made an annualized 7.3% per year. Now that's not a bad rate of return, right? And in 25 years, they made 8.7. Now remember these numbers when we get into what they really made. PSERS, the 19th largest state-sponsored defined program. They now have 53.3 billion. 2 years ago, they had 50 billion. That's a good question. Where is it? That's what I'd like to know. Now, one of the things that I'm going to recommend to all of you, there's copies over there of a lot of this information. I recommend you take it. I recommend you review it. And whoever your legislator is, contact them about it. Call them, write them, whatever. You want to know what's going on here. Because realistically, if we don't fix this problem, what's going to happen to your property taxes? They're going to skyrocket. This needs to be fixed to stop that from happening. I found this, I thought this was interesting. This was put out by Warren Buffett. 6 years ago, in 2008, Warren Buffett wrote a piece stating that everybody should invest in the Standard & Poor's. Back then, on 10/14, he wrote this and said, the Standard & Poor's went up 137.3%. American market. And the earlier chart, were we in the American market with these pensions? American market was down here. Risk was up here. We didn't make the 137%. This was put in the paper by the PSERS. They gained 10.5 billion more in returns between 2004 and 2013 than it would have using passively managed investments known as index funds. I want to touch on them in a minute. It paid out 3.8 billion to give them an overall profit of 6.7 billion. Now, if they made 10.5, paid 3.8 billion out in fees, did they not forfeit 36% of the profits in commissions? Do you think everybody should know about this? Especially the members of the union? They should know about this. And I want to tell you why. The saying is, we didn't put in enough money. And the other saying is, they're taking out too much money. That's not true. I analyzed a $40,000 income earner working for the union, putting their 7.5% in, but putting it in a 401k. where we don't have all these fees? I went back 35 years in history. What would they have? Now, I've always heard complaints about, oh, the crash just killed investments in 401ks. So I took the money that would have had, put it back in 2007. What would the income would have been?
400,000.
The income would have been 5 times what they're getting now. 5 times. But also take into consideration, I only put their 7.5% in. I put nothing in from the state. That's how much money is being sucked out of this pension fund. But the people who are retired, the teachers, and the government workers, their pensions could be 5 times greater if they went to a 401k and conservatively invested. Any of you hear about the rule, the financial rule called the Rule of 72? Whatever interest rate you're getting, you divide into 72, that'll tell you how many years it takes for your money to double. Right? Well, if they're getting 8%, how many years should it take for that money to double? 9 years. Let's see if that happened. First of all, this is the March 2014 report. Total investments, 50.7. Now, from then until now, earlier they stated that they made 7.5 billion. But yet, this is only up to 53 billion. This comes right off of their report. If we go to the year before, 2014, 2013, well, that one, Tom? Nope. 2014, nope. My mistake, that's okay. But actually what happened is from 2013, they had 50.1 billion, and the following year, after making 8% or $4 billion, they now have 50,700,000,000. That is off of their financial reports. So they either didn't make the 7%, or a lot of money is disappearing. Either way, we're paying for it. This is a PSERS investment portfolio chart. So if we would go back to 2004, where they had 48 billion, if they did make 8%, that should double. So they should have a minimum in the 9-year period, which should be 2013, of $99 billion. Now, did the market really do that in that period of time? From 2007, I'm going to go from 2007, that's what I have here. They had $67 billion in 2007. Okay? If they would have been invested totally in the Standard & Poor's, that number of $67 billion would have went up 127%. Think about that. If they would have invested all the money in the Dow, it would have went up 125%. But they lost 67. In 2012, they were down $24 billion. That's a shame. That's a crime. Has other pension funds worked? Answer is yes. Mr. Calderon got this for me. Pennsylvania Municipal Retirement System. Since 2009, their investments went up 142%. And theirs went up. There's a big difference. The other interesting part about this is where the people from the pension funds stated we should not invest in index funds. Actually, 45.7% of all the investments in this is in index funds. They didn't take a bath. Guess who's also on the board here? Rob McCord. Now, Rob McCord gets these reports. He gets this one, and he got all of them. Do you mean to tell me he don't know the difference between losing all that money and making 137%? Does that make sense to you? If he's doing his job as a board member, he should have been up there and said, well, wait a minute. This is what's happening here. Or does that go back to the donations? This is controlled a little bit differently. The next chart is very interesting too. We hear about the fact that the legislators didn't do their job to fund the pensions. We're not putting enough in. Well, in 1990, we were supposed to be at 8%. Where were we? Like 119%. We overfunded, actually, from 1990 through 1999. From 1990 to 1999, what was the market up? Big time. What happened to all that money? Now they want to say because it was underfunded here, it's our fault. It's the legislator's fault. They want to keep pointing the finger so we don't look at them. That's what's going on here. If you would add that in, which I didn't do, I just looked at their actual reports, you'd add that in too, we'd have a tremendous amount more money in there than the 100 billion. Now because of this, has the state ratings dropped? Did Moody cut the ratings in the state? Yep, because of the pensions. There's also other financial problems here in the state. Go to the next one, Tom. There we go. Fiscal condition rating of the top 50 states. Not 57 that Obama thinks is in it. You know, we're talking about the 50 in the United States. When it came to the budget solvency, Pennsylvania was 37th. Cash solvency, 47th. Okay, long run solvency, 30th. 26th in service level solvency. 42nd in fiscal condition. Now, this wouldn't be because we're overtaxed, it could be. Okay. Is that the last one there, Tom?
That's it.
This is the basic numbers of the major problem here. So what I'm going to have Tom do is Tom's going to come up. He's going to talk about what he's doing, how he feels about this, and then we'll answer any questions. And maybe we can get you all to help us and get this done. Let's welcome Tom Cadriano.
Give a little time to wire up here.
Okay.
How's that?
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Just to let you know how we hooked up this past summer, he had called and said about this pension issue, and I said, why don't we come in and talk? He came into my office and got a hold of the 8, 9, and 10 books that he has here from Harrisburg, both pension funds. And honestly, you know, the 253 members, I dare say, most members probably don't realize that at the end of each year, there are published reports for the Essers, the PSers, and the Commission. 3 actual reports. This guy went through them for 8, 9, and 10, 3 reports each year, and also 13. And then we sat down, and then the furs started flying. What has been going on here? Now, you got to remember the composition. You know, I went to business school before I went to college, so I know how to read a set of books. And when I graduated from college, I taught school for a year, $5,000, a lot of money back then, right? And then I sold insurance and real estate for 3 years, dealt with some mutual funds, and then also I ran a production line for the firm, one of the firms back home before I got into the legislature. And I had to do the profit and loss statement on that production line every single day when our production was done. So down to the nickel and dime. So I had some feeling, and I always liked numbers. So I looked at what Richard's been explaining here, and we're wedded together. He's an arch conservative Republican. I'm a moderate to conservative, or sometimes a little liberal Democrat, depending on the issue. I'm not going to give you a baloney. But on this particular issue, it's almost a crime what's been going on with our tax dollars, and blaming the employees, whether they're school district or state employees or state legislators. They've been blinded by what's been taking place here. Now you got to remember, I'm one of 253. You can't be an expert in every area. I'm chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. I spend a lot of my time on judicial matters and judiciary issues. We have 20-some committees. No one can be an expert on all things, trust me. If each one of you were a chairman, I would trust you as you would trust me, because that's our word of honor that we live by, usually up there. If somebody lies to you, then you put the X on them and you say, that's my girlfriend probably calling. Where you at, Tom? I'm in Emmaus. Where are you at?
At the bar.
That's what she probably thinks. But we dealt with over 500 pieces of legislation, more than any other committee and more than most committees combined this past session. So I specialize in focusing on this. However, when Richard pointed this out and we started digging and digging and digging, so I said, well, how many members serve on this ESSER board? Well, it's 11. How many from the legislature? 4 members, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, 2 from the House, 2 from the Senate. 11. Well, who appoints the others? The governor, whoever the governor happens to be. Remember that. Remember the numbers. The majority are appointments, not from the legislature. And this is under Democrats and Republicans. I'm not painting anybody with the brush. I'm just saying under any governor. What's on the other side? The PSers, School District Employees Retirement, 15. How many from the legislature? 4. 2 Dems, 2 Rs. 2 from the House, 2 from the Senate. Okay. Who appoints the others? The governor. Who has the majority? The majority that are appointed by the governors. Interesting. Let's just follow that. Where do these people come from? All walks of life. Do they really have the background? Now you really start to scratch beneath the veneer. Even members of the General Assembly that Glenn Grell's a good friend of mine. He's on the PSers, Republican from Cumberland County. Dan Frankel, he's on the Essers board, Democrat, chairman of the Democratic Caucus, comes from Allegheny County. And I'm poking at these guys. They're friends, but I want some answers. Do you really understand what's going on? 46% risk investment. And Richard hammered that pretty good. Gold, derivatives, home equities, real estate. Why would you keep investing in risk investments when the bottom was dropping out? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. So I talked to Gene DePasquale, and one of the things he said, Tom, he said, let's not get into this before the election. That can cut both ways. And you got to understand, I've been a friend of Tom Corbett for 14 years, and I'm a Democrat. And I was being torn between Wolf and Corbett with this whole thing, and with the election and everything that went on. And I know that Corbett just, you know, didn't play the hand that I think he could have and should have played, but didn't because he's been fighting too much internally within his own party. I mean, part of the problem I see as why he lost, his own leaders in the House and Senate pushed him away. They didn't want to be associated with him. And I think that really caused the problem for him, partially, with his defeat. But to blame the employees on this issue, whether they're school district or state employees, is absolutely inexcusable. The employees have been paying 4.5%, 5.5%, 6.5%, 7.5% of their gross income. They have never skipped a beat. Well, where's the problem? These boards. I don't think they know what they're doing. And then what Richard said, and he called me, he said, Tommy, we got to follow the money. What do you mean? The campaign contributions. Democrats, Republicans, governors, leaders, members of the board. And then I'm thinking, you know what? There's another way around this too. You may not be an elected official. You may not be one of those four or McCord, but suppose you have a vested interest in a certain company or an enterprise, and your friends in New York, the money changers, want to reward you with a contract or some business. Who's going to know? Where's the transparency? One of the things that I was doing today in Harrisburg, and I'll get back to this, I was reviewing with my attorneys in Harrisburg the recommendations that Jack Wagner came up with. Happened to be a Democrat. DePasquale happened to be a Democrat. He was saying, DePasquale, tell me, we don't want to tilt the election one way or the other, because this could hurt either one of them when this comes out. But I'm in total agreement with what you and Richard have been doing about this issue. And he's going to do something, just what I don't know. He doesn't have the authority, like the legislature, to make legislation, although he did serve in the legislature, and he served on my committee. He's an attorney by profession, but he's running the Auditor General's office. And he said to me, what we had uncovered this past summer is absolutely true, and it's outrageous what's been taking place. So the recommendations that Richard had mentioned, and which I have in my hand here, we're going to be crafting into legislation. And we're going to try to put some manners on both of these boards to stop the nonsense. And if you're taking any kind of benefit or any kind of money or gifts or whatever from any of these fat cats in New York, you got to report it. And we need to know about it. It needs to be exposed publicly. And if there's any conflicts, then you shouldn't vote on that. You should abstain. There has to be some kind of controls put on these boards, and they have to be open to the sunlight. You know, everything else we do in government, except these two boards, I'm scratching my head and I'm thinking, how are they getting away with all of this stuff? And nobody knows what's going on internally. We have to be open and honest about these investments. And the thing that really disturbed me when we were talking about this summer, the employees didn't create the problem. During the 8 years under Ridge, when the stock market was going like this, I was up there then. I know what happened. Now, you know, the governor prepares the budgets each year, and basically it's rubber stamped by who's ever in the majority, Democrats or Republicans, it doesn't matter. They basically rubber stamp it. For whatever reason, he decided, Ridge, the stock market's so high, we don't have to put any money in. And you got to remember, it's money from the state for the state employees' pension and the school districts. And then the school districts are supposed to put their money in. Well, they weren't putting their money in either, in most cases. So I kept saying, well, I wonder what they were doing with that money. where was it going? They weren't reducing our property taxes. They certainly weren't reducing our state income tax. Where was the money going? Because they weren't putting it in there. Just remember what Richard said. If they would have been putting that money in there religiously, we wouldn't have this problem. And remember what I also said, the employees continued. They have never skipped a beat. They kept putting their money in, but the state reneged, so did the school districts. We would have and should have had about 50 billion in the state employees and between 100 and 150 billion in the school district employees' pension funds. We don't. Now there's a crisis limit. Well, who made the problem? Well, the employees, they're grabbing too much. Really? Don't buy that. Don't buy that for a minute. That just is absolute hogwash. It's the members of these boards, the high management fees, like Richard was saying, we only had a handful that were investing and they were doing pretty good for us in the beginning. You open the floodgates up and all of these money managers and grabbers in New York were feeding off us. You know, grabbing billions and billions of dollars and still are doing it to this day. I think it's outrageous. It needs to be exposed to the public for all that it's worth. Why they continue to do the same thing over and over and over again. Then you follow the money. Who's getting the contributions, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, whether it's a Republican governor or a Democratic governor. What's going on here? That should be stopped. That should be illegal, unethical, and stopped. If you want to serve on any of the boards, you must cut your ties. If you're a business type person that gets appointed, you cannot deal with these firms. One, no elected official should be getting any kind of money from any of those firms if you're serving on those boards as campaign contributions. And don't try to use subterfuge by giving it to the state Republican or the state Democratic committee, circumventing it. We need to put these firewalls up to stop that nonsense. You know, it's all well and good after the fact now, and we're going to be preparing an op-ed piece that's going to be going on to all the newspapers. This is also going to go to every member of the General Assembly, along with hopefully the proposals in the legislation to see if we can get some action and movement. And you know, normally what happens up there is they're like, what, the three monkeys, they give you one of these? Because they don't want it, just like with property tax. You know, I've been on that kick since Sam Rohr. That last summer I called and got 39 Democrats and Republicans, and we got it up to 98, 4 votes short. And I was just telling people here that the day before the vote, I went into my Harrisburg office and saw the list of opponents, and it was like a who's who of everybody, every major state group, whether they be Democrat or Republican, the Chamber of Commerce, the Manufacturers Association, the retailers, all the unions, the farmers organizations, the doctors, the dentists, the lawyers. I thought, oh my God, what a battle we're going to have. And they peeled off of us. Unbelievable. And we ended up with, I think it was 59 votes. And you know, I thought, my God, I worked that whole summer to get us up to 98 because normally they trust me. Because if I say something, if I give you my word, I keep it. I'll fall on the sword before I'll back off. And especially on issues just like this. Will anybody listen? I hope with what we're doing here with the different groups, we can start to get a groundswell of support to say, make these changes and do it now. And with that, you know, I'll shut up and answer any questions you may have. Yes, sir.
Don't those managers have a fiduciary responsibility to the retirees? That's a legal requirement? Shouldn't somebody be looking into this?
I absolutely agree with you. And I would like for the Attorney General to take a look at this. I'm concerned that, you know, they did that review, Clark. Now, I'm not casting stones. He was handling the state employees. I'm a state employee. He was handling our funds. 3 days a week, what was it, 6 figures he was making? High 6 figures as a salary, 3 days a week. And they caught him day trading. No, I'm not a market investor guy, but I think he was getting stock information and doing it on his account on our time and making money off of it by getting information from New York. He left at the end of December. So did the chairman. But go ahead.
Then also another thought.
Turn it on.
Another thought, the State Ethics Commission for some of these people. I mean, this is clearly unethical. They're patting their own nest. I think that's a violation of the state ethics law. Couldn't that also be an avenue?
That's why I'd like the Attorney General to take a closer look at this. Now, I know that she was involved in an accident and she's had her own set of problems, but I do think this is ripe for somebody to take a closer look at it. Not just the Ethics Committee, but I think there may be some borderline ethical or criminal potential violations. I mean, you know, the SEC, like Richard was saying, on these hedge funds and derivatives and some of this other nonsense, I'm thinking, we ought to stop that. It ought to be prohibited, period. And if we have to do it legislatively, you know, you would think that this is a board, you would use your common sense and you would stop that practice, especially if you were losing money continuously, right? Well, if they're not doing it, how do you put manners on them? And they say, well, everybody's got to make legislation. You do too much of that up there. You see what happens when you don't do enough of it. This is going wild.
And the worst part about it is these are people who are approaching their elder years, are dependent on their
Amen.
money, and these people are robbing them blind.
Amen. Now, how do we fill the void? Because, like Richard was saying earlier, what are you going to raise taxes? To pay for mistakes that were made by people that may or may not have been profiting off of what's been going on? Question mark. Who was making money off of this? We certainly weren't. We were losing money. Yes, sir.
If you could hold on until you get the mic, who wants to talk?
I had a couple of ideas since you were talking.
Yes, sir.
When you were talking about sending the op-ed piece out, should you also send it directly to the union leaders?
I'll send it to anybody. It's not going to bother me and the business community because everybody has a vested interest in this. Why? We're on the hook, whether we know it or not, for those pensions of the retirees and those that are still in the system. And if the bottom is falling out, who's responsible and who's going to make that up?
I'm just going to say that between the state employees and the teachers are an entirely educated group of people. If they are actually shown what's going on, can't they then get in and call for some lawsuits against the managers of these people? Because they're obviously, I'm going to say, can we sue for malfeasance in office? A lot of these people, because clearly they're in it for themselves. They're not in it for a salary and then to serve the people.
Right.
They're simply sucking money out all over. And as you pointed out, approximately half or 2/3 of the money has already disappeared.
Right.
Of what should be there.
They have a fiduciary responsibility when they get on these boards. And as we get sworn in January, we have a fiduciary responsibility to the citizens and taxpayers of this Commonwealth. And that should not be taken lightly. So if you get appointed to one of these boards like that, shouldn't there be, first of all, an educational process as to, you know, what are these things that we're investing in? And do we need to invest in all these different, like if we had everyone here I was going to invest in, you're going to charge me a management fee. Richard had said, why aren't they looking at, if you make me money, you get a percentage, no management fee. You get a percentage of the profits that you make off my money. We could do that, by the way. And a lot of investors do just that. It's almost like a double wrap. You're not only getting the management fee, you know, you're getting the 20%, you know, they're grabbing top and bottom. So, I mean, it's a double whammy that we're suffering as taxpayers, and those boards should be held accountable. I absolutely agree with you.
I would like to say when I was in college, I had the privilege to have Dr. Philip Elkin at Philadelphia College of Textiles and Science point out that all these so-called professional managers who manage all these mutual funds take enough fees out of them that it really doesn't matter what they're doing. You can actually throw darts at the page,
Right.
and at the stock market page, and actually do better than they do without even knowing anything about the investments,
Right.
because there are no fees coming off the top. Whatever you get, but it tends to be better than the best of the professional managers.
I couldn't agree with you more. And the shotgun approach, as you saw Richard's portrayal of all of those different investment firms, I looked at them and I thought, why? Why that many? What's going on there? Who's making money and why? I mean, common sense would say, this doesn't look right. This doesn't smell right. You know, it may be borderline criminal. It may be. Part of it could be stupidity. I mean, I'm not saying we have the most brilliant people that are serving on there, but somebody is throwing curveballs and they're not hitting them. Yes, ma'am.
I was working in New Jersey for quite a few years in the school system over there, and Governor Whitman, there was a nice tidy little sum in the pension fund that just kind of was sitting there, and they took a lot of it and used it for other things. And of course, once it leaves, it's never replaced by the state. But the teachers were required to pay a higher percentage from their salary to get more money back in there. So I'm just wondering if some of the governors might have said, gee, we need some money. The pension fund's just sitting there, not doing much, so we'll borrow. And you never see it put back in again.
But one of the things that you just said, I said, and I've told members and other people in the groups, teachers as well as the state unions, that if, and this is terrible to say, but I think it may have to happen, if we have to put more money in individually as employees, we just may have to do it. If that means to save the pensions, to bump it up another percentage or two. But it's like a slap in your face. We didn't cause the problem. The governors and these two boards did. But somehow, some way, we got to get ourselves out of that hole. And I don't want to see the taxpayers get strapped with this, but they're saying, oh, the ceiling's falling in, you know, we got to do something. Yeah, here we go again. That's trying to figure our way out. Oh, and by the way, let me just share this with you. When I was in Harrisburg today, I was told that, and this really shocked me, I thought it was $1 billion that Governor Corbett borrowed. It's $1.75 billion that was borrowed that we got to pay back. So this hole is getting a lot deeper than I think most people realize. Yes, sir.
I had one question too. Is
Yes,
she
sir.
was just saying that they took money out of this pension stuff, so that's all legal and everything's okay?
Well, you know what they do when they balance a budget? When they get a budget every year, they present it to the appropriations committees in the House and Senate. They hold hearings. They bring in all the different secretaries. They grill the different groups, you know. And then it's almost like pro forma. Boom, boom. Okay, most of it gets approved. Do they follow the money? What I think was happening during the good times, the good years, they were using it in different areas. Economic development as an example. I mean, they were putting it where they thought it was going to do them the best good. I mean, if you were the governor and you were, in your second or third year and you're thinking, I want to run for re-election, I better start throwing some economic development money there. Or maybe I better throw some more money into education. And, they were doing those things. Don't misunderstand me. I think that's where some of the money went. I don't know if that's where all of the money went. Yes, sir.
Let me follow up to that. Some of the investing that the pensions do is done inside of the state of Pennsylvania.
Good point.
So this could go to counties or school districts and things like that. Okay, and they're supposed to keep an accurate record of that, which is not done. Okay? I want to go back real quick to one of the other statements. Can anything be done? Yes. I know a lot of you are familiar with the interest swaps. Okay? Jack Wagner said in his report there, sue the investment bankers. In this problem, yes, they should sue the investment bankers.
When did he say that?
Huh? 2006.
2006.
Okay? Because they're the ones that's causing the problem. But now, can we get leadership who's receiving all the money from them to do that? That's another area. Because Wagner said that before DeVoswell took over.
Now you have different boards also, like the Ben Franklin Partnership and these other economic boards, where they do plow money into incubator type businesses, startup businesses, expansion of businesses, and that's been done under Democrats and Republicans. You look at the Port of Philadelphia and the kind of money they've been pouring in there, and you know, you spread it around all across the state with all the initiatives. Look at what's been going up in your area up here. I mean, think about the millions of dollars that have been poured into the downtown Allentown, right? And we have the Santander Arena in Reading. You got your arena up here. Those have scattered it all across the state. And there's state money involved in every single one of those, by the way. Yes, sir.
Well, I just want to ask you a question. You know, you're talking about people being fair and honest and everything else.
Yes, sir.
If you read the morning column the past couple of days about the legislators, I worked for the government close to 40 years. I never got paid for lunch or dinner. Okay? You think about it, the legislators, I know for a fact, because I talked to Mackenzie about it a few times and a few of the other, they drive from their home to go to work. How many people in here got paid to drive from home to go to work? Legislators get it. Either they get mileage or they can rent a car.
Or you get one from the pool, and it's a lot less.
Well, it's rent, okay?
But they do it in Washington too.
Okay. But that doesn't make it correct.
Okay, let me get to your point, because I hear this all the time. Now I'm going to throw a couple things at you that I'd like you just to mull around. We have a budget right now of $29.7 billion, and we were talking about it on the way up here. And I just want you to understand, $29.7 billion. You get $300 million to operate the General Assembly, and $300 million to operate the courts. It's about 1%, okay? But nobody ever looks at the $13 billion, some of it wasted in welfare, $11 billion in education, and $2 billion in corrections and growing. It's $2.77 billion now. But what do you look at? Well, let's look at the legislature, and I'm saying, look at the big enchilada. How about how many millions or billions are wasted in welfare? Nobody wants to talk about that. Let's go after the legislature.
Yes, we do. And that's part of your job.
Well, no, wait. It's also part of the people's jobs to report things, because we can't do everything. You say it's us. Who gets to appoint the secretaries of all these cabinets? Who do most of the 50,000 employees work for? The governor, not us.
And you have nothing to say about it, right?
Very little. Once the secretaries are appointed, they run the show. If you've been in government, you know how it works. You know what I'm saying.
That's why I'm bringing it up.
It's true what you're saying. I'm not saying the legislature isn't at fault and has some sins. I would agree with that. You know, I'm not blind to what you're saying. However, you know, I think it's time that the public really starts taking a look at the other $29 billion and how that's being spent or wasted.
I agree with you totally. There's so much of it in the government, it's atrocious. It's from all different areas and everything else. I'm just saying, I brought that up because it was in the paper, and I was wondering if people saw it. And we're talking about stuff like this, which is tremendous. I'm in the market, and this is ridiculous.
I mean, is that not billions?
Yeah.
And compared to the legislature, and you're saying about 300 million. My God, 300 million compared to 75 billion.
Okay, the last time I'm going to say, you started home. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is just a quickie. It seems that...
Hold the microphone up.
Oh, okay. This is just a quickie. It seems that every organization that I know of always has periodic audits. Who is the periodic auditor here, and why isn't that a big problem as far as responsibilities?
They do their own audits. That needs to be changed. That's one of the recommendations, and I'm putting it into legislation if you got it. Absolutely. I agree. You're right.
You better do a good job for me, I'll tell you right now.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Two questions. One is, what's the vetting process in order for these companies, in order to be able to invest the money of both of these pensions? Number one. Number two is, and I am on a board as far as the state level for licensing of nursing home administrators. Every board has a transcriber who transcribes everything that is said, everything that is handed out at that board meeting, okay, that I go to. What is going on as far as with these two boards? Okay, that's what I think.
That's what I think is going on, my personal opinion. Look, I think we need to have a good system of checks and balances. I think they're out of control. No disrespect meant, I think they need a good education. This gentleman really educated me this past summer about a lot of the terminology and the issues. I dare say that most of the board members, well-intentioned people, probably in most cases, don't understand half of what we've been talking about here tonight. This is deep stuff, and unless you're involved with the market and you study it and you know how to do the investments and everything, this is difficult for people to understand. And to try to get members of a board, and I agree with you, there should be total transparency. You're dealing with billions of dollars, plus how many hundreds of thousands of lives that depend on these pensions. There's got to be change. And this, in all my years that I've spent in Harrisburg, this is the hardest thing to turn around, just like we're talking about property tax. Any of these, it's revolutionary, not evolutionary, it's revolutionary, trying to make these changes. And trust me, I'm going to try, but I'm going to need your help too. You've got to get onto the representatives and senators. One person can't do it all by themselves. You need 102 in the House, 26 in the Senate. Did you have a question, sir? Yes, ma'am.
Okay. One of the points that you often hear is that the SIRS and the PSIRS should, as part of pension reform, be forced or transitioned to the 401k. Does it really matter if does it come down to the investments instead of what type of fund it is?
I had invited Tobash, you've heard of him. He's the one that's on the point for legislation. And Richard and I invited Richard and I and Mark, Representative Rossi, and Tobash to my office in Reading, and we sat down and we heard him out. And then both of us said, well, wait a minute, up to 50,000 defined benefit. Anything over 50,000, 401k. You're going to collapse both of them. You can't, it's like taking a baby and cutting it in half. You can't do it. It's just not going to be viable. It's not going to work. But what Richard said about the 401ks, the pure 401ks, that's a difference. I mean, that is a difference. But with what Tobash, and in all good faith, he thinks that that's a good plan. When we examined it and we talked about it, and I know we didn't convince him, he still thinks it's a viable option, that if you're making less than 50,000, you're going to stay in defined benefit, which means there's going to be less money going into that, because anybody over that, you're in 401k. How's that going to work? Somebody's going to lose money. You're not going to have a steady stream of money coming into what's owed to the people right now that are on pensions, and the overall pension system is going to start to be depleted. I just don't think it's going to work.
I
Yes, ma'am.
understood that to mean that if you made $80,000, your first $50,000 would be in the defined benefit, and then your $30,000 would go into the
Yes,
401k.
it splits it, but
Why would you punish the people making less than 50,000? Why would you want to put them in a program that is not doing what the market's doing?
that's the point, yeah.
Yeah, that was my complaint about that plan. The market, if you go directly into a 401k, you are not going to have all the fees that we talked about.
Right.
You are not going to have all the administration fees that the trustees charge and pay their payroll, their pensions. That goes away. So why would you want the people making less than 50,000 to have a subpar retirement? That's my complaint about that. We'll get back to it just in a second. I want to touch on two other things. The SCRS, this just come out. This is their strategic investment plan. This is the one they just wrote. They just put out. You know how much they're following this in their investments? This isn't important to them. They wrote it, they gave it to the board members, and they're saying, say, Charlie, we're going to do what we want.
Mm-hmm.
They are violating what they just put out. Okay? The other thing I want to mention real quick is, when this was printed and sent out, it didn't only go to the board members, it went to a lot of other people. House members, Senate members, it went to the executive director of the Pennsylvania School Employees Retirement System, the Pennsylvania Associated of School Retirees, the majority chairman of the Senate, the executive director. This went out to a tremendous amount of people. When did you get it, Tom?
Never got it. Never got it.
You know how I got this?
Request.
My wife and I went to a town hall meeting. Senator Teplitz. And I asked him questions about the pension. So Senator Teplitz said, at the end of the meeting, he said, well, he says, I work for Auditor Jack Wagner. Interesting, right? So I asked them for this report. I got it from Teplitz. He is now a senator. Now, he not only got this report, he got the report that Tom was talking about, the welfare fraud, and he also got the report about the interest swap should be stopped. What's Mr. Teplitz doing about it? Nothing. Now, believe me, I'm going to use this against him when he comes up for election. Okay? The other point I want to make with this is the treasurer back here, when this was done, all know the name Bob Casey? Okay, he got it. Guess who worked for Bob Casey? Tom Wolf.
Now, let me just say this also about the employees. They hire their own employees for each board. And these are supposed to be professionals that are to be advisors. Like, you know, if I'm a board member and you all here are just part of the staff, we're going to rely on your expertise to guide us in what we should or should not be investing in. Because that's your role. That's what you're getting paid to do. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, what's their background? Who are they connected to? What's going on here? Because who in their right mind would be investing in that many groups? Who's advising the board to invest shotgun approach? I think to myself, something doesn't sit right there. It just doesn't seem to make sense. Why is the board allowing that to happen? And who's guiding them that way? So, I mean, those are the kind of questions I'd like for DePasquale and maybe Kathy Kane to fire at these boards. We want some answers. Or the General Assembly, who has members sitting on these boards. You know, I'd love to be sitting on one of those boards. They'd want to ride me out of the town on a rail, because when I was on the Ben Franklin Partnership, I used to poke at the business community. We're giving you $5 million to expand your business. I want to see how many more employees you've hired. Well, that's the whole purpose, Tom. You know, we're going to hire employees. And then when I kept poking at that, it started to get a little embarrassing. We were finding out, well, I didn't serve more than a couple terms. I was a thorn. I asked too many questions. But there's somebody that, yes, sir.
Yeah, another question, another side of the problem. There's also the structure of the pension plan itself. Again, is that something that also should be reviewed?
You know, what we looked at, the vast majority of people, both, especially with the state, I'm not too sure about the school districts, but with the state specifically, they're not all making tremendous pensions. They aren't, because they weren't making tremendous salaries. With the vast majority of the old retirees, they were at the lower level. I mean, they weren't making $50, $60, $80, $100,000 a year. They might have retired at 20, 25, 30, 35,000. So they're not getting those kind of pensions. They were probably a half or a third of that. And then made up with Social Security, of course, like almost everybody else gets. Teachers, it could be somewhat different. I guess the older teachers probably went out at a much lower rate of income than the newer teachers that are starting out. But the other fallacy that I found is they keep saying, well, the bottom's going to drop out at the bottom. But they base it on the fact that everybody's going to retire at one time. And I think, that ain't going to happen. People are going to continue to work, both at the state and the school districts. Why do they paint the darkest possible picture when they come out with these statements? It's totally underfunded. It cannot be sustained. What are you basing it on? Well, we owe everybody in this room a pension, and we've got to have that money there. Well, you all ain't going to retire at the same time. I mean, chronologically, let's look at the statistics, you know, as to how that's all going to fall into play. Yes, sir.
I've worked in public, you know, private sector most of my career. Last company I worked for was a public company, and after I was vested, probably 2 years after I was vested, they froze the pension plan. Sorry, no more pension. You're going into a 401k. No choice. You dealt with it. This is the way it is. This is what the company does. You don't like it? Too bad. I'm not a big fan of legislation, but when they did that 401k plan, they had several brokers come in, and they picked whatever gave the best deal. Not a big fan of legislation, but if you're going to legislate, why can't it be legislated that you have one company do that you have a bidding process,
I agree.
and you have maybe a 3-year or a 5-year contract, and whoever comes in with the lowest rate to charge gets the business.
I don't disagree with you at all. The most frustrating thing that I found in serving in the legislature is that you would think that common sense would prevail, and it doesn't always. The other thing that too many times you have the leaders of both parties getting in bed, not literally, but you know, and we get it on the chin. You know, it's take it or leave it. They come up with that attitude, and you sometimes think, what the hell is going on here? You know, they mix this stuff up that it just gets so darn confusing. Sometimes members don't know which way to vote on an issue because they muddy the waters. I'll give you one good example real quick. Preemption, all right? That the state will preempt any local municipality as it concerns guns. Now the legislature and the leaders, most of them are attorneys, they know better. You don't mix apples and oranges. Well, we passed a metals bill, a theft of metals bill out of the Judiciary Committee, of which I'm Democratic chairman. That was a standalone issue because of the thefts that are going on with copper. You know how they're tearing out all the metals and the wiring. All right, we increased the penalty. Well, here we go. What did somebody offer on the floor of the House? Well, the state will have preemption over all the municipalities, whether it's Allentown, Reading, Philadelphia, that you can't pass laws dealing with anything dealing with guns. Well, guess what's going to happen? It's going to be challenged in the courts, and the courts have ruled on this before, similar type issues. You can't put two different issues into one bill. They have to stand alone. And I'm thinking, why did the NRA think, put a bill up there, get that bill out dealing with just preemption, and be done with it? Well, they didn't. So that's going to be challenged, and here we go again, spinning wheels. That preemption nonsense is probably going to be struck down by the courts. Why? Because you put it on a bill that had nothing to do with preemption. It had something to do with metals, period. So, you know, this is what goes on up there sometimes, and you just shake your head in amazement and you think, just like with these issues we're dealing with here tonight, common sense should prevail, right? Right. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just wondering what the point of action is. What you're going to do.
I'm going to try to, first of all, this guy's been like a lieutenant with me throughout this whole battle. He's conservative Republican. God knows I'm going to need his help reaching out to Republicans in the legislature, and hopefully we can build an alliance like we did with the property tax. This should not be a deer in our issue. It is not that kind of an issue. We should pull together, look at what we need to do, implement the recommendations that Jack had issued way back when. I think most of it's still relevant. I have my attorneys reviewing this right now with DePasquale's people to find out how much of this has really been implemented. And I think what we found out already is none of it. Now, can I do it legislatively? I'm going to try. If I need to get, and I've said this, I don't care about pride of authorship. If you're a Republican and you're in the majority, as it is now, I'll craft the legislation and I'll give it to you and I'll go on as a co-sponsor. You might have a better chance of getting it through than I would. I don't care. I just want to get the job done. And I've done that on numerous occasions. This closing of the Delaware loophole, as an example, I talked to Jimmy Cox about this just yesterday. I said, Jimmy, I'm going to craft a piece of legislation. I want to give it to you as a football. Would you want to run with it? What does it do? Well, if we close the Delaware loophole and whatever monies we take in from the corporations that now have to pay it into Pennsylvania, let's reduce our corporate net income tax, which is the highest in the state, from 9.9, maybe down to 4.5 or 4. Sounds like a plan. Kill two birds with one stone. Close the loophole, but dedicate that money to go into reducing our corporate net income tax so it's not the highest, maybe it's one of the lowest, to attract businesses. We're open and ready to do business. Maybe it makes sense. Yes, sir.
Yeah, if I understand your plan of action as it's defined here tonight,
Yes.
is you're dependent on us to get to our state senators and our state reps.
If you could
to keep
help.
pressing this issue. But, and I agreed with that. And another thing that I cannot get past the idea that these people who were overseeing these pension plans had a fiduciary legal responsibility. That
right.
money, no matter what you do to fix this,
I
that
know.
money still needs to be brought back, repatriated back into the funds. And if the Attorney General or somebody needs to take some action to try and do that.
Well, I think what Richard is pointing out, with the market doing so well right now, the S&P and indexing, suggestions, I think solid suggestions that this man has made, could we start to get out of the hole? I think so. You're talking about 25 billion and 50 billion. That's a lot of money.
It's a big hole.
Yeah, I mean, how much time would it take? I don't know. Some of you people in here probably are a lot smarter than I about how much time it might take to double or triple that money. I don't know. But I think we ought to go on that path and stop the nonsense that we've been fooling around with.
I would ask you, though, as one of
Yes,
the
sir.
leaders in the House, to please do talk to Ms. Kane at the Attorney General's
Oh, I will.
office and Mr. Pasquale.
I will. You have my word on that. I already talked to Gene twice about this.
Try to get it repeated.
Gene is with us. But now you got to remember, we need the help of the Republicans. Are going to be running the show in the House and the Senate. They have 119, we have 84. Forget the politics. Let us just do the right thing here. In the same way in the Senate, it's 30 to 20. I don't care about the politics. We got to address this, or it's going to come back to haunt us in our property taxes, maybe our income taxes, God knows what else. There'll be legal fights and who wants... My two sons and their families did go to Naples, Florida, just this past year, thank you. So I do know the feeling.
Just a couple thoughts there. You had mentioned the 401k, how to set it up. Actually, I am working on a program for that I am going to give to Tom, Tovash, and all of that. But what I'm putting in it is safeguards for the employees from the legislators. I don't want the legislators or this board involved at all in the 401k. I want them to have no say. They've convinced me that they don't know how to handle anything.
Right.
So I don't want them involved in it at all. And the investments I want to be done on what I call the 10-10 plan. In other words, if you look at a particular group, say the growth market in the country, so you look at all the growth funds, we go back 10 years, and they need to be in the top 10 all 10 years. Or if you do global income or growth in income, the one that is in the top 10 over the last 10 years are the ones that's picked. You take the top producing in each class, and that's what goes in there. So it can't be done by one fund. You can't hire a Fidelity to do this or an Oppenheimer to do this because they don't have the number one funds in all the classes. So what you need is an administrator separate from the mutual funds where they allow all the top mutual funds to be in the plan. Okay?
Good luck.
That can be set up. It's not hard to set up, but I guarantee you a lot of the legislators are not going to like what I'm going to say because they won't be able to get their fingers in the mix. Okay? Another question?
So it seems like, with the 401k plan, I think, in my opinion, the biggest problem is that the whole thing is centralized. I worked for a company with about 26 people, and we had access to a 401k. Why can't, if a 401k is implemented, why can't it be decentralized and have each department or each each department have their own 401k and run them independently.
Too much administration, it costs you a fortune.
Well, if you have, if I was in a company that was 25 people, I mean, how could they afford it? You know, that's...
The more people you have in it, the expenses go down. So by pulling the SDRS in one,
The mic.
But it seems like they actually go up when it's centralized because they're losing money, right? That was the whole point of your talk, right? Was that they're losing money. I think the problem is that it's centralized. So.
No, actually what happens is, as you keep the plan, the more people you get into the plan, you can negotiate to get the cost reduced. You can get the expenses reduced each and every year based on size. Okay? But most of the plans like you're talking about goes and you sign up with a company. It may be Wells Fargo. Okay? It may be Fidelity. But then you only have the option of what they want to put in there. And I want the options to be the best in every sector, not just one company. And if that company doesn't produce, 3 years from now we reevaluate. If they're not in the top 10 in the last 3 years, guess what? You're out of here. Okay? And there's going to be no fees to get out of it. Okay? And we want the 401k set up simple. We want to keep the costs down. The employees today can't borrow off their pensions, can they? No. So you don't put a borrowing feature in the 401k. Now you've reduced the cost. Okay? Any little bell and whistle that you add to 401ks drives up the cost. So the lower the cost, the better for the client. Okay? And another thing I really recommend about 401ks over defined pension, and I'm going to use my father-in-law as an example. He worked for the state. He retired. He got his check. He died. Guess what happened to his money? It died too. My mother-in-law got nothing. And he did not receive the money that he put in himself, let alone any interest.
That's an insurance distribution.
That's another reason I recommend a 401k. If you have a 401k, you pass away, it goes to your spouse. Either way. The spouse passes away, guess who gets the money? The kids. And that's exactly what the federal legislators did for themselves. And if it's good enough for the federal legislators, it's good enough for all of us. That's my feeling about that.
I got a question. I don't know if these two gentlemen want to keep going on this, or I think we can end it. We can have a couple goodies. There's stuff in the back, and you can talk personally with them. And we'll end now. It's up to these two gentlemen.
Whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
I just would want to run a commercial. We didn't run the commercial yet.
Oh, okay. I'll have to ask Tom if he
I
can.
want to run the commercial.
The commercial. Thank you.
This was an incredible meeting that way. Lots of information. We can thank them for coming.
It had reached 10 years, and it was started by a guy when he was in college in the 30s. And the professor said it was crazy. And when he graduated, he started this one on the basis that he was taught, he witnessed before, and they gave him a bad report on it. And that went, and it grew, it turned out to be one of the best. Who was he? I don't know what it's. What did I do?
We're still recording.
Not over. I'll talk to you.
Yeah.
We're recording it.
I'm sorry.
Couple thoughts I want to leave you with.
I'm sorry,
Number
I
one,
didn't realize it was
Tom Cottadrione and I will be at the Lehigh 912 the first Friday in January. We will be up there at that meeting also to do this. And anything that happens between now and then that I find out, we're going to add to the presentation. That's point number one. Point number two, the commentator. Most of you have it, most of you read it. I'm going to ask you to do me a favor with that one. Take a couple extra along with you. Give them to a friend. Okay? If somebody shows up at your door, we had our Ehrlich's man stop at the door. Guess what he left with? The next time he come back, guess what he subscribed to? Okay? He advertised in it. We need to get the word out as much as we can to help each other. And as Tom was saying, we do need your help. The leadership in Harrisburg is going to oppose this. And they're going to oppose it big time. Because they're getting the money from, major money from the investment bankers. And the investment bankers are going to want to continue collecting these commissions. So we need your help. Go to your legislators. Beat them up. If they say anything isn't true, tell them to call Tom Cottadrione. He's on board. Okay? Give him my name. I'll call him. I'll meet with him. But we've got to get this done. This is one of the things that's killing us on properties. Our property tax. It's killing us. We've got to stop that. We've got to have 76 pass. 76 would fix this, by the way. If 76 would pass, this would end. So would the interest swaps. And we've got to get an end to that. So let's work together and get this done. I'm going to stick around. I'll answer any questions. May God bless and have a safe trip home.
Thank you, everybody, and like I say, if you want, sign up over there. We'll send you emails of what's going on in the following months, so you can keep in touch, and if you have any ideas for us, please let us know, and we'll see what we can do about that. Enjoy for the evening. Thank you.